Simon says subscribe and click on the bell icon to receive notifications.
Hi everyone, my name is Ben. So let me introduce you to today's instructor, Dave Casuto. Dave has 2 master degrees, instructional technologies and organizational psychology. He's trained countless learners face-to-face, but also many others with his online courses. He's created a significant number of courses for us at Simon Says It, including courses for various Adobe products, a number of Microsoft products, including our recent Excel 365 Essentials course, and many more on the way later this year. I'll pass you over now to Dave.
Well, thank you, Ben, and thank you everyone for joining us from every corner of the world. It's always so impressive to see where everyone is coming from. So I'm very excited to usher us into this world of Excel lookups. And the good news is we're going to learn so much more than just lookups, because we really kind of want to give you a sort of full toolbox of all the different tools you need to learn in order to really make your efficient use of lookups. So I'm going to go ahead and start to share my screen so you'll be able to see. So we have these 2 files. We have VLOOKUP, HLOOKUP, and we also have XLOOKUP. So we're going to go through a number of different examples to kind of really appeal to everybody's sort of types of data set and many different types of circumstances where lookups are going to be valuable and relevant for you.
All right. So if you're ready to go, let's go.
So let me go ahead and just open up the VLOOKUP HLOOKUP file. And we're going to see that we have a number of different tabs on the bottom here. We have our VLOOKUP autofill, VLOOKUP, VLOOKUP data, etc. So let's just kind of define, first of all, what a VLOOKUP is going to do for us and why we might want to use it. And again, this is just going to be one of several different types of examples that we're going to use. So if we look over here on the left-hand side, we have these kind of IDs and we have some blank spaces here. And on the right-hand side, we have our data that we essentially want to feed into here. Okay, so we know our employee ID, okay, but we don't know, let's say, their name. We don't know their salary, right? We might not know their department, etc. So we're going to look up into this lookup table on the right-hand side based off of the ID. Okay, so we need to use a VLOOKUP for that. Now the V in VLOOKUP is vertical, right? So we're going down on this list to find everything here. Okay, now let me go ahead and just show you, first of all, kind of the basics of what our syntax and expression is going to be. So I need to look up this 29002 somewhere over here to find the employee name. Okay, so very simply, I'm just going to do an equal sign. Starts off every formula. And once I do VL, notice how it just pops right up. And then once it's in blue, I'm just going to hit the tab key. Beautiful. And you'll notice here that it gives us our little IntelliSense kind of clues. We have this VLOOKUP value. What are we looking for? Well, essentially, that's going to be the number that we know, okay, or the value that we know. So as an example, it could be like a customer ID. It could be a social security number. It could be a phone number, something like that, something that's unique and identifiable. So that's the number we know. So very simply, all I do is click on that. Right? So then I'm going to hit comma, and it takes me to the next part of my IntelliSense. Now here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a table array. All that's asking me is saying, hey, where does that whole kind of set of data live? Right? Where does my ID live? Where does my employee name live? So all I have to do is highlight everything. Now I'm going to highlight this, and you're going to see I'm going to get the right answer, but I'm going to show you a little bit more of an efficient way of doing this that's going to help us for our next exercise. But let me just show you, first of all, what we're going to do. First of all, I just highlighted everything, and I just did Control Shift and then down arrow and then right arrow to highlight everything, or you can do it manually. Okay, so you can see here what it's got. It's got the whole data set right there. That's where we're going to find the employee name as well as my ID. That's great. Now I go to my next part of my expression, and you can see here is my column index number. Essentially, it's saying, hey, in which column within this array does your employee name live? Okay, and it's a very simple kind of analog way of approaching this, which is just counting, believe it or not. So the column index number in this case is just the second one, because it's the second column of my table array. It's not the second column in the whole thing. I'm not counting from A, I'm counting from E where this starts. Okay, so I'm just going to do a number 2. That's pretty simple. Okay, and then I'm going to do another comma, And then notice how this pops up. We have an approximate match, or we have an exact match. When you're working with like words and letters as opposed to numbers, typically it's going to be an exact match. So I'm going to do now is just double click on false, or I could even just type it out, and there you have it. And now you see there, I have 29002 is Suzanne Farmer. Well, let's just go ahead and confirm that. I'm just going to go ahead and just do a find 29002, and there she is, right? And you're going to see I can look up all of her stuff more or less with the same process. But what I'll do in the next time is I'm going to put in a different column number. Okay, so let's go ahead and head back up to the top here, and we'll go ahead and do the salary one more time so you can see exactly what that's going to look like. All right, so I'll go this time a little bit faster, =, VL. Okay, and my lookup value is pretty much the same exact thing. That's the number I know. That's my qualifier. That's my unique identifier. Okay, so then my lookup array is what? Hopefully you're thinking this through in your head. It's going to be everything over here on the right-hand side. So all I do once again, I'm going to click here. I'm going to do Control-Shift, down arrow, and then right arrow, right? And then I'll come back over here to my formula, and you'll see that for this time, my column index number, because I'm looking up the salary, is going to be what? 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, see that? So I'm just going to type out 4 because it's the fourth what? The fourth column. Okay, so that's how it's going to know where to look. So essentially, it's a cross-reference between this number and then whatever number you're going to put in the column index. Okay, I'll do one more time, and then this time I can actually type out the word false. No problem there. And now we can see, all right, so Suzanne Farmer, okay, how much is she making? We'll go ahead and just double check that. And there she is making 72,000. Beautiful. Okay, now this could work if you're looking on a data set that's external as well as internal. I'm going to show you something that we can do since this is an autofill, but we're going to see we're going to have a little bit of a problem. Okay, so this is, like I said earlier, we're going to learn not just about VLOOKUP, we're going to learn about other things as well that's going to help our VLOOKUP go a little bit smoother. So let me go ahead now. I'm going to do an autofill for all of these to come down. Okay, so let me just show you now. If I just simply do a double click here, we're going to see that it autofills all the way down. And we're going to see it's going to do the same thing here. Now, you might not realize this, but these numbers are not right. Okay, and let me just show you. If I go into this formula here, I want you to notice how my table array shifts relative to where I have my formula. Okay, let's go ahead and do that one more time. Let's come down to the end here. It shifts relative. Now, if I come all the way down to the bottom, see that? It goes all the way even to empty spaces. Okay, so that might happen to a lot of us if we are planning on doing an autofill for our VLOOKUP. So let me go ahead and talk to you about what's happening and why it's happening and how we can actually solve this. So this is known as a relative reference. Okay, so relative to where it starts, it's going to continue to go on just right from there, relative from there. That's why it continue to go on 10 rows or 20 rows, wherever that starts. So opposite of that, or the counterpart, is what? It's an absolute reference, which we could do that. But I'm going to show you an even better way, something called named ranges. Okay, so an absolute reference and a named range kind of fall into the same category. But what's neat about a named range is that it allows us to have some kind of label or an identity around it. So therefore, it's going to be very easy to plug it in, but it's also going to be easy for us to identify it. Okay, so let me go ahead and demonstrate that for you. I'm going to get out of everything right here. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to create a named range. Okay, and we're going to use this tool several times throughout this exercise. Okay, so all I need to do in order to create a name range is first select the range that I want to be named. Okay, so once again, I'm going to come over to here and I'm just going to highlight everything, right? So Control-Shift, down arrow, and right. And now I have 742 rows. Everything is selected. Beautiful. Now, how do I create a name range? Very simply. Over here in the upper left, I have this thing called the name box. Okay, and all I do is simply click in there and just start typing, right? And I'll just call this employee info, right? Let's see if we got any typos in there. I'll do underscore info, right? Just like that. And by the way, no spaces are allowed inside of name ranges. And then once you finish it, this is very important. A lot of people forget this. You have to hit enter when you're done. That's how we know it's now complete. Now, if I click away and I click back on this little drop down, I now have this employee info name range. And when I click on it, that gets highlighted. Okay, and that's cool. But now let's put it into a formula. We're going to see this not only is going to make it that we can identify what's in there, it's also going to address the idea of this whole relative reference, but it's also going to be way easier to put into our formula. So I'm telling you right now about name ranges because not only this is going to help you with VLOOKUP, but it's also going to help you with all kinds of other different formulas and functions. Okay, so let's go ahead and do it again this time with our name range. So =, VLOOKUP, and my lookup value, once again, same situation. Now, for my table array, instead of me having to go all the way over there and highlighting it and doing all that other stuff, I'm now just going to type out EMP, and then notice what appears now. Because I programmed that to happen, that employee info named range now appears. I can just hit the tab key, comma, column index number is what? That's going to be a 2, and then I'll just type out false, and then bam, I get the same thing. Let's go ahead and do the same thing a little bit faster for our salary. To do =, VLOOKUP. Okay, come over to here, A2. Of course, I got to type that in as well. And then here we go, info tab. Okay, and then once again, I'll just type out 4, and then false, and then boom, beautiful. Now, I'm going to go ahead and do my autofill. Okay, I'm going to do my autofill going all the way down, boom, from there. And this employee info, notice that's in my formula. I double click here, it's in my formula right there. Okay, now, when you do name ranges, the nature, by definition, they are already absolute references. And I'm going to show you some back-end stuff around that in a little bit. But just so you know that when you do name ranges, you don't have to worry about absolute reference versus a relative reference and all those situations around it. So let's go ahead now and double click. And now, if I come inside the formula, notice how it stays up on top the whole time. See that? I'll go to another one. See that? It stays all throughout, keeping the integrity of it from beginning to end. Beautiful. Okay, I'll do the same thing for this guy, and now we're good to go. Okay, so no issues there. And also, look how elegant that looks, right? Do you see how when somebody's looking at it, they know exactly what you're referring to? Okay, so it's good for you, and it's good for when you are collaborating with others. Now, let's go ahead and take a look at some back-end stuff around name ranges. So if I go over to here to a new tab altogether, I'm going to go over to here to my formulas tab. And you'll see that there is something called the name manager right here in the middle. Right? They really want you to use name ranges. So if I click on name manager, you'll see this is it right there. This is where it lives. And you can see here refers to what, and you can see how it's referring to E2 through H742. And you'll notice those dollar signs. The dollar signs mean what? Dollar signs mean absolute references. Okay, so that's how we know it's working, and that's why they're kind of counterparts with each other. Now let's go ahead and take a look at another example of how VLOOKUP might work. So in this case, I'm going to be looking up some information that happens to live on another sheet altogether. With this one, right, they were right next door to each other. Okay, but with this one, it might live someplace else. So I'm going to be looking up individually their name, the department, earnings, and regions. Okay, so we go over to here. I have my lookup data right there. Now I'm going to preempt this by just doing a name range right now, because I know that eventually I'm going to be doing a VLOOKUP, and I want to make it very easy for me. Okay, so very simply now, I'll go ahead and create my name range right here. So very simply, I'm going to go over here to A2 and then just go down, Control Shift down and right. And then once again, I'm going to go to my name box. You'll see there it is right over there. And I simply click in there and I'll come up with a different name. I'll just call this HR info. Okay. And again, no spaces. You can make it all lowercase. You can do whatever you want. You don't have to put an underscore in there as long as there's no spaces and as long as you remember it. So this whole thing now, you'll see here, now I have 2 name ranges. If I go back to my name manager, you can see I have 2. Okay, now let's incorporate it into this set of data here. So I need to now look up E001. Well, if we look at this data, we have E001 and all of its respective information. So I'm trying to keep everything confidential. I don't know, their names, anything like that. So I need to look up based on this number, what their name is, what their department, what their earnings are, etc. Okay, so once again, let's start it off. Equal sign, VL, and immediately, as soon as I see it in blue, I'm going to hit the tab key. Beautiful. What's my lookup value? What is the number that I know? Well, it's just right up here. See that? Boom. That's the number I know. And now I'll go ahead and try to find that. I'll just type out HR and look at that. Look what pops right up. Cool. Table array. That is just going to be my HR info, named range. My column index number, well, I think that was a 2, but I'll see if I get that right or wrong in a second. I'll just type out false. And now you can see that name is Malcolm. So let's go over to here. And yes, it was column 2. And there it is, Malcolm. Okay. Now let's change this number, E001, for a second. Let's see how this kind of machine is going to work for us. I'm now going to type out E007. Okay, I do that, and now you'll notice how it dynamically changes. Okay, that is how our VLOOKUP should work, right? Because it's trying to look up E007 and it's cross-referencing it to find, hey, what's in column 2 of that table array, right? Boom, it does that. Let's do that one more time. Let's do E009. Okay, come over to here, and I'm just looking it up. Boom, and you can see there's Rita. Okay. So it's working pretty flawlessly. All right, so let's go ahead and finish these off. All right, and then actually before I do that, let me just understand, okay, my department is in column 5. So good idea to kind of check that out beforehand. VLOOKUP, what's my lookup value? Same thing, it's the number I know, it's that unique identifier. Okay, my table array, super simple. God, I don't want to have to go all the way over there to do that. Good thing I created a name range. There that is. Hit the tab key for my table array, and then column index number I said earlier was 5, and now I'll just type out false, and now Rita Gregg is in sales. Let's confirm that. Rita Gregg is in sales. Beautiful. Everything is working flawlessly, and then once again, let's go ahead and change that back to E001, and we see that Malcolm is in human resources. Go E007. Melissa James is in accounts. See how we're creating this cool little machine for us. All right, I'll go ahead and finish these off. And if you're following along, I encourage you to also continue doing this as well as I'm doing. That's why I've given us enough examples for everybody to really give this a try. That really is how the brain appreciates learning, to really do it. Watching is one part of it, but really doing it is really where it starts to stick. All right, so I'll go quietly as you practice as well for each of these. And if you haven't created a name range, by the way, it's totally okay. You can highlight it manually still. You don't have to have the name range. All right, by the time you finish, it should look like this. And certainly, I could format this if I wanted to make this in dollars. It's not going to affect the formula at all. And you can see there that is. Beautiful. I love that. Now, before we go on to another VLOOKUP lesson, I want to show you another little sidebar that might help you out for something like this. Because if you notice, I kept having to kind of switch over E007 to E002, and then I do that. And I was like, okay, great, let's go to E003. I have to double click in there. And that's a little tedious, right? I see that it works. That's great. But what I'm going to show you now is a nice sort of partner that works very well with this type of lookup. And we're going to learn about data validation. I'm going to show you how you can create a drop-down menu to make it so you can have every single one of these available, meaning every single one of your employee IDs available in a drop-down to make it quick and easy for you just to kind of change them. Again, we're trying to create like an automated machine for ourselves, okay? So first of all, I'm going to do is I'm going to delete this, right? And you're going to see that, uh-oh, things are going to get a little wonky. It's like, oh, wait a second. I was looking up something in here. Can't find it anymore. Okay, no big deal. We're going to change this now. So again, we're going to do something called data validation. All right, so let's go ahead and click on B5. And I'm going to go to my data tab this time, right? So here's data up on top here. And then over here on the right-hand side, kind of sandwiched between all these little funny icons, there is my data validation. I'm going to simply click on that. And you'll notice here I'll have these 3 tabs up on top. We'll focus mostly just on the settings tab for right now. And then you'll see here that I have something called validation criteria. And what kind of validation criteria am I going to allow? Well, validation criteria essentially is saying, hey, it's only this type of data that I'm going to see as valid. And in this case, my valid criteria is going to be whatever's inside of a dropdown. So if I click on this dropdown under allow, I don't care about whole numbers or decimals. For me, it's really about a list I'm about to create. So I choose that. And now it's asking me very simply, well, what is going to be your list? Okay, so I'm going to show you 2 ways you can do this. Number 1, I'm just going to highlight everything, right? So boom, I'm just going to go ahead and go over here to source. My little box is going to start blinking. I'm going to come back over to here. And now I'm going to highlight everything. See that? And that's what's going to be inside there. Okay, and you can see there it is. Beautiful. Okay, and then I'm going to click OK. Now, when I click on my cell, you'll see that I have this beautiful little drop down here. Okay, and let's just go ahead and test it out. E007, boom, that comes right up. How about E11? Okay, great. Paul Anderson, oh my God, I'm really cooking. You see how fast and easy that is, and way slicker, way easier to do. So that is how you create a very simple drop-down menu using data validation, connecting to data that already exists, right? So if we go back to that one more time, we'll see what we have here. Okay, so you can see how I have allow list, and then my source is going to be that A2 through A41. Let me go ahead and do it in a slightly different way this time. All right, I'm going to go ahead and clear that out. And I'm going to this time show you another variation of how you can do it using named ranges. So you can totally do it this way. There's no right or wrong here, but I want you to kind of really see the value of named ranges. I'm going to go back over to here this time, right, to my lookup value. And guess what? I'm going to make all of these from A2 all the way down into a named range. Okay, so let's go ahead and highlight everything. It's going to be all of my employee IDs, and I'm just going to go ahead and make this a named range. So go over to here, and I'll just call this M dropdown. Okay, call it again whatever you want, but I'm just going to copy that to be safe. No typos. And now I hit enter, and that becomes another named range, right? And you can see, boom, there it is, it's added to it. Now, let's go ahead and see another use for named ranges, now with dropdowns. So I click over to here, and this time I'm going to go to my little data validation. Once again, I go over to here, to list, and then notice for my source, instead of going to highlight everything, I'm just going to do equal sign and then the name of my named range, right? See that? Watch this. I click OK, and now guess what's in there? How slick is that? It's another way to do name ranges and see them in action. All right, now let's go over to here to this VLOOKUP grades. All right, and sorry, this is bringing up any trauma for anybody, going back to the high school days. But what we're going to do now is we're going to do a different variation on VLOOKUP. Okay, and early, if you remember how I did VLOOKUP and I put false at the end, in this case, we're going to be doing VLOOKUP with a true. Okay, so remember, false was going to be an exact match, where true is going to be an approximate match. Okay, so let's look at this. So we have this lookup table here, and we have, if somebody gets a 65, right, on their test, they get a D. Okay, if they get a 70, they get a C. If they get an 80, they get a B, etc. But what if they get a 74? What do we do then, right? We need to create some type of lookup that says, hey, listen, if they get this particular grade score, right, what grade letter do we give them? So the way that it works is we need to tell VLOOKUP that it's going to be an approximate match because there's not an exact match for this range of data. And we're going to look at 2 different examples of this in this case, and we're looking at another example someplace else here. So let's go ahead. Again, it's going to be VLOOKUP. And you know what I'm going to do before I go any further? I'm going to make this into a name range. Why not? So I'm going to go and highlight my data here, and then I'll just call this grades. Pretty simple. Hit enter. Beautiful. Now I'm going to do equal sign, VLOOKUP. Okay, and what's my lookup value? It's going to be whatever's in B2. That's the number we know, right? That's going to be feeding into this. Okay, my table array, I just created it 10 seconds ago. Do I want to have to highlight everything again? Nope, I can just type out grade, right? Boom, that comes up. And now what am I looking for? Well, I'm looking for my grade letter in this case. So what number is that? It's very simply just a 2, right? Again, we're not counting over from the far left. We're counting from our table array. So it's just going to be a 2. And now here is where things get a little different. Where we're going to say not exact match, we're going to do an approximate match. Okay, so I'll double click on 2 and then I hit enter and then boom, 89 is a B. Okay, but what if this person, right, did some extra credit and she came in and now she has a 95. Look at that. Her grade goes to an A. See that? Because it leaps over there. But let's go ahead and do one of those like vague things, right? Let's just say we find out that those were not her grades somehow, right? So now let's give her a 78. And now you can see is somewhere in between there. That was that vagary. So that's how it works. It kind of like falls down to like the lowest one. And we're going to see one that has to do with actual numbers in the sales environment in just a little bit. Okay, so now I'm good to go because now all I need to do is do my autofill going straight down like that. And we can verify that everything works beautifully and perfectly. See that? Love that. So I'll go ahead and just bring that up for you in case you want to try that out yourself. And again, understand that the major distinction that we've done here is saying true because it's an approximate match. Okay, let's go ahead and do that again. For our status, that's going to be basically pass or fail, VLOOKUP, and then once again, what's the number we know? That's going to be our lookup value. Table array is going to be grades. Beautiful. Column index number, say it with me, 1, 2, and 3. See that? Okay, and then I'll just type out true this time. Beautiful. Okay, and yes, Abby, you did pass. And who did not pass, we can see here is Roberts and Henderson because their grade is below 60. That's one example of how we're going to use the approximate match. Let's look at it in maybe a more sort of like numbers oriented kind of perspective. So once again, I'm going to start off making a name range. All right, but let's go ahead and take a look at this data. All right, let's just say we are in charge of, sales for a retail shop, and we want to know how much discount to give people. Okay, so if they spend $750, you can see that they will get a 2% discount. If they spend $10,000, they're going to get a 20% discount, etc. But what if there's some vagary? Once again, what if they spend $525, right? Where do we go with that? What if they spend $10,003? Where do they go? Or $9,999? Where do we go from that? Okay, so we're going to go ahead and create, first of all, our name range, and we're going to figure out how we can do this. And you're going to see it's going to be very similar to what we have before. So I'm going to highlight everything, create my named range. Great, that's all set up. And again, we're trying to do an approximate match for this. So I'm going to do equal sign, VLOOKUP. And once again, what's the number I know? What's my lookup value? What's dictating it? And then I'm going to say my table array. I just created it. And notice there it is, discount. That's easy. That's why we use name ranges. Okay. And my column index number. Well, what's going to be feeding into this? What number column? 1 and 2. Love that. Okay. I'll just very easily now type out true. And now we get that 2%. And now if I change this to 1,000, that jumps up to 3%. Let's go to 2,000. And naturally that jumps up to 10%. But once again, we've got some vagaries here. Whoever spends that exact amount, right? Very seldom that's going to happen. So if I do 4,900, you'll see that's not on any of these numbers, right? But you can see it's 12%. So you might say to them, hey, wait a second, if you spend another $100, right, you're going to get a 3% discount. Oh, great. So I'll go ahead and just do 5,000 and notice how that jumps up. So hopefully you see how that works when you are doing lookups and you have exact matches versus approximate matches, which ones you want to use at different times. So we've got kind of a big full toolbox of all the different kind of elements we might want to use, including our named ranges, working with absolute references possibly, and also earlier we talked about doing data validation. let's say, for example, we have errors. Okay, so sometimes, let's say, like you're looking up somebody, types in an employee that doesn't exist, right? This employee ID number, you're going to have errors, right? You see this, like, oh, wait a second, or maybe that person doesn't work there anymore. Something like that. We're going to have these errors. So what we're going to learn now is how to do an if-error nested function with VLOOKUP, right? It's a nested function. We're going to be looking at the VLOOKUP that we've already been creating, but we're also going to combine it with an if-error function, okay? Because if there's an error in our VLOOKUP, we want it to yield some type of message, for example, okay? So once again, I'm going to go ahead and just make this all into a name range, okay? And I'll just one HR2, do underscore so we can see it clearly. Okay, so that's my name range for all this data here. And I'm going to just do, very simply, I'll do my VLOOKUP again. Okay, I'm going to do equal sign, VLOOKUP. Okay, and then once again, same process we did before. Okay, and then we'll do HR2 this time. Okay, my column index number, I'm looking for the name. So I count over 1, 2, same situation. I'll do false. Okay, and now you'll see I have an error. Why do I have an error? Because this employee ID, right, there was a typo there, or maybe that person doesn't work there anymore. So I can easily fix that, and you see the right one comes in. But what I want to do is I want to actually kind of have some messaging. I want to have some type of, interactivity and communication from the machine when there's an error that's not that ugly NA kind of nonsense, right? I want it to actually show a message, okay? So let's go ahead and do that now. So I'm going to keep this so it was before, okay? So I'm going to double click to get back into my formula, okay? And I'm going to do a nested function of an if error, okay? So if there's an error in this VLOOKUP, so think about a nested function as like a sandwich, right? How like you have like 2 pieces of bread and in the middle, whatever you're going to put inside your sandwich, okay? So I'm just going to go right to the outside of my VLOOKUP, right there. I don't know if you can see where I am. Right in there, right in between the equal sign and the actual formula. Okay, and I'm just going to type out if, and then notice how when if error appears, it highlights in blue, I'm just going to hit the tab key. And then notice how easy that makes it, right? How it automatically puts it into caps, it puts in another open parentheses for me. That's beautiful. Okay, so I have an if error. So this is this one piece of bread right there. Okay, great. And now this is my meat, right? You can see, now I go to the outside. Okay, and I have part of my IntelliSense is, well, if there is an error in whatever this value is, and this value just happens to be the VLOOKUP, what do you want to kind of yield? So I'm just going to say no employee found. Okay, and notice I'm putting into quotes. I close it out and I hit enter, and you can see beautiful. Notice how nicely that looks. And I'll go ahead and do another one. Boom, and that's going to change. I'll go ahead and put another one here. Uh-oh, no employee found. Oh, I'm sorry. I keep messing up with these. Okay, great. Okay, now I'm getting it right. Okay, so if we take a look at this one more time, let's go ahead and look at our sandwich. I have if error, and then I have the other piece of the bread here. So the if error is one piece of bread. This is another piece of the bread. And then this is going to be the middle of your sandwich right there. Okay, our original VLOOKUP. Okay, so we'll go ahead and do that for these guys. And by the way, I can start off with my if error right now if I wanted to. I don't have to do it in any order. I can do if error right now and then start doing my VLOOKUP right there. See, so you can do it really in any order. I just wanted to start off with something that you kind of already knew. So I'll just go ahead and do it again. Here is my lookup value, table array, right? That's going to be HR2. And then my column index number is just department 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, false. Okay, and now guess what? I'm on the other side of that piece of bread. Okay, and remember in quotes, this is very important when it's a text element there, text argument, you need to actually put that in quotes. Okay, so no employee found, and then end my quote, end my parentheses. Boom, Shannon is in fact inside accounts. Beautiful. Let's go ahead and test this out. And I'll do another error. Happy with my W's, always coming up. Boom, no employee found. I'll go ahead and do one more just to be a little fast about it. Okay, and then continue on. VLOOKUP. what's my lookup value? Table array, HR2, column index number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, because it's the 6th column. False, as we know. Now I'm on the other side for value of error. No employee. Close out my parentheses. And there we have it. And let's test it out one more time. I'll just do some crazy one there. Boom, no employee found for all of these. HLOOKUP is the counterpart to a VLOOKUP. So the HLOOKUP is a horizontal as opposed to vertical. So in this case, we're going to be, instead of looking at the column index number, we're going to be looking at the row index number. So good examples, or like good sort of use cases for this, is when you have your columns and the header of the column is your unique value, right? Because my unique value to kind of search down below here is my quarters, right? So notice this is going to be my lookup value. It could also be like months of the year. It could be potentially like, clients, products, something like that. And that's how you set your data up. Okay, so I don't want to say they're not competitors with each other, right? It all depends on how your data is set up. Okay, so HLOOKUP isn't used as often, not because people think it has like less, it has it's inferior to it. It's just that they don't know about it. And they don't understand the practicality of it and the application. Let's see what this is going to look like now. So I'm going to be looking up whatever is in Q1, and I want to look up the gross profit. I want to look up the net profit. I want to look at the percentage profit. And notice I have those labels here. So let's go ahead and do =HLOOKUP. Actually, you know what should I do? A named range here. Okay, so I'll just call this one profit. I need to have my named range actually built out. So this is included here. So my numbers here were not included. So I started off too early. So this is a great example of how now I could adjust my named range. Okay, let's pretend I did that on purpose. So let's now go back to my name manager. Okay, just like how I did in formula. And I'm going to go back to profit. And this time I'm going to edit it. Okay, and I'm going to start off with a 7, right? You see there? Okay, and now my name range should be the whole thing. Let's go ahead and test it out now. Okay, boom. Okay, because the problem was when I did my named range, I didn't actually highlight the values that should be shown up there. Okay, so again, I totally did that on purpose. So now we can see it comes up with 25,000. Let's do that again. Now that we have our name range all set up, so I'm going to do =HLOOKUP, beautiful, lookup value, same situation. My table array, once again, is profit. Okay, and that should show up nicely. Good, it highlights everything. My row index number, it's my net profit. So I'm going to start from the top. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Okay, and now type out false, and now beautiful. If we look at Q1, net profit is 10,500. So if I click here, notice I have a dropdown already locked and loaded, because you can see how dropdowns can work just as well with another context. So let's go ahead and look at Q4. All right, and if we verify, we're going to see here Q4 for my gross profit is going to be 60,000. I need to update these. My apologies, because this is now going to be 4, and this is going to be 9. That was right. Okay, great. Now everything's looking fine. All right, so Q4, 30,800, and then my net profit is 24,080. Now let's go ahead and do it one more time. HLOOKUP, my lookup value, same situation. Table array, profit, beautiful, everything's there. And then my row index number for percent profit should be 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. False. And now 26% for Q4. That looks beautiful. And we'll do one more just to validate here for total. Beautiful. There's 25% net profit. We'll see for total is, and then 122, and beautiful. Everything works flawlessly. Okay. So again, what's the distinction? We have our column headings as our unique identifiers. That's the main difference there. So why was XLOOKUP even invented? Well, there are some limitations to when we are working with, let's say, VLOOKUP. I want you to notice something special about this data set here, okay? That the unique identifier that we're working with here happens to be in the fourth column. If we go back over here to our original VLOOKUP, notice our identifier is in the far left column. VLOOKUP, I'm going to say this very slowly and clearly so you really get this. VLOOKUP can only look up values that are in the far left-hand corner. So when a lot of people are working with VLOOKUP, they're like, oh, wait a second, I only know VLOOKUP. So if my IDs are in the fourth column, I just got to move everything over. And that could be a bit of a challenge, right? That can be a bit of a chore. So that's where XLOOKUPs comes in, okay? So we're going to see that there's a number of different kind of benefits to working with XLOOKUP, but certainly use whichever ones you prefer, okay? And absolutely, we could use named ranges here, but just for the interest of time, I'm just going to do without a named range so you can see what it's going to look like. And we'll also notice that there is the if error option that's built right into it, right? That we don't have to do an if error, okay? So let me go ahead and deconstruct what we're looking at. Already, this is already complete, okay? So if we go over to here to my XLOOKUP, right? We'll see my IntelliSense. My lookup value, yes, it's the number I know, that's great. And then it's broken down into a different set of arguments. My lookup array is essentially saying, where can I find G2, right? Where can I find all this cast of characters? And notice all of these ID numbers live inside here, right? So we're just saying it's somewhere in column D. We don't really know. Then we have what's known as our return array. Well, what are we looking for? What do we want to return as a result, right? Where does that live? Oh, that lives somewhere over here in column A because I'm looking for the employee name, okay? Pretty simple. And then finally, if not found is the equivalent of your if error, right? So they make it nice and easy for you, okay? So let's go ahead and do that. And I'll do it a few times. And again, I want to give you a chance to practice. So I'm going to do XLOOKUP. Not a VLOOKUP, not an HLOOKUP, XLOOKUP. Now, it starts off once again with my lookup value. I choose that, G3, that's my lookup value. And then I hit comma, and immediately it takes me to the lookup array, which I kind of like the way that they phrase that too. It's like, where can I find all of his buddies, right? So, okay, somewhere inside of column D. And again, this could absolutely be a named range. We're not going to do it right now, but 100% this could be a named range. But because I did the whole column, that could actually allow me to do an autofill, okay? And now my return array. Well, what am I looking for? I'm looking for the employee name. So once again, I go over to here to column A. I select the whole column. Beautiful. And I could stop right now, by the way, okay? I could be done and don't have to worry about an if error because I just want you to notice how everything that's on the right-hand side, they're all in hard brackets. So you might not really care about those. It's not relevant for you. It's too advanced and just doesn't matter. You can ignore it and then you can be done with the formula. But I do want to put in an if error kind of message there. I go to comma and then notice that it says if not found is highlighted. Again, it's in brackets because it's optional. And I'm just going to say no data. Okay. And then I close it out. All right. And now we can see there's Denise King. All right, and we can go looking for her. I'll go ahead and just find that just to verify. 29545. Okay, and then there she is, Denise. So it's found this number, and it is then looked up her name based off of that. So we see it works flawlessly. Let me go and do that one more time. I'll go a little faster. This is my lookup value. This guy again, beautiful. My lookup array. Well, what am I looking it up? I'm looking it up somewhere in column D. Right, and my return array, what am I looking for? Somewhere inside of column A, and then close it out, and now beautiful. And there's no data for this one, right? It's like, oh, wait a second, 3322. Oh, you know what? I guess, yeah, that person doesn't work here anymore. Oh, you know what? I think it's actually a different number. So I'm going to type out 11652, right? But I can at least see that this is working. That's great. So my if error little notification is in fact effective. So you know what? It's actually 11652, and we can see, beautiful, that is in fact Ernest Haynes. Okay, so it works awesome. Super happy with that. Let's go ahead and just drag this down. And now you can see beautifully. Love that. All right, I'll do one more. Go a little faster this time. XLOOKUP. This time, I'm looking it up by the social security number. Okay, so I find that. Go to here, my lookup array. Where am I looking it up? Boom, it's going to live somewhere in there, right? My social security numbers live inside SSN. That makes sense. A return array, what am I looking for? I'm finding out how much they make based off of the social security number that I know. So very simply, I choose the column heading, and then I'm at if not found. Okay, great. And again, I could do my autofill, and that speaks to everybody across the board here. And I'm going to finish this off by just doing one last thing so you can see one additional benefit of how we can work with XLOOKUP. Okay, so this is known, it's maybe a little bit more advanced for some of us, but this is known as an array. Okay, so an array is a huge time saver because it allows us to kind of just do a swath of what our formula is going to be for several different cells rather than just one. Okay, so watch what I'm going to do now. I'm going to highlight everything, and I'm just going to start typing. I know it seems weird, but I'm just going to start typing even after I've highlighted everything. I'm going to do XLOOKUP, just like that. Beautiful. And then I'm just going to go over to what's my lookup value, right? There it is right there. That's beautiful. Okay, and then my lookup array is, okay, well, where am I going to find all these guys, right? There's going to be somewhere living over here, just like we just did earlier. Now, here comes the fun part, is when we say what our return array is going to be, since we want to do kind of one big wide swath of all of these, we have to highlight everything what we want, right? And Excel's getting very excited because it's about to save you a ton of time. Okay, let's wait for it. And now, can you see how I just did all of those, right? All 5 rows. And then I'm going to just go ahead and say no data found, close that out. And now notice what just happened. I put it into one cell, but because it's an array function, it actually popped it all out to all of them. Okay. And not only that, if I were to now change this to give it an error, let's do our good old W right there. Watch this. Boom. No data found for all of them. Oh, let's fix that. Let's go and do 007. Boom. They all come in from one cell. So XLOOKUP allows you to do an array function as well. And it started off with me highlighting all of the cells and just typing. And I left here for you a little cheat sheet so you can see exactly what to type in.
Well, congratulations everyone for completing this course. So hope you enjoyed this class, hope you learned a lot, and we look forward to seeing you in future lessons. Thanks everyone.
Hi, from everyone at Simon Says It. We hope you're enjoying this training lesson. Please like this video to show your support for the channel. If you want to take your learning further, earn a certificate for this course, and gain access to over 200 courses ad-free, click up there and go to simonsayisit.com. Thanks for watching, and back to the course.
Let me introduce you to today's excellent instructor, Dave Casuto. Dave has 2 master's degrees, one in instructional technologies and organizational psychology. He's actually trained countless learners face-to-face, but also many others from his online courses. In fact, he's probably trained millions of students and learners worldwide from his online courses. And he's actually created a significant numbers for Simon Says It, including courses for various Adobe products, including Photoshop, InDesign, Illustrator, and a large number of courses for Microsoft, including a recent new set of courses we've released on StreamSkill and Simon Says It for various Office 365 courses, and many more coming later this year. In addition to that, Dave likes to travel and has traveled to nearly 50 countries. On that note, Dave, I'm going to pass it over to you.
Well, thank you, Simon, and thank you everybody for joining us. Very, very excited to usher you into this wonderful world of data analysis and particularly working with pivot tables and data modeling. We actually have a number of different exercise files available for you that you can use either while we're going through the class or certainly afterwards to practice. All right, so if you're ready to go, let's go. One of the first things we're going to talk about is pivot tables. I want to kind of just first define what a pivot table is and sort of what the value of a pivot table is. So a pivot table is an interactive table. And really what it allows you to do is to summarize large bits of data and really kind of take it and kind of tell stories around it, really to be able to do some analysis around what's otherwise kind of like flat and two-dimensional, but be able to kind of cross-reference and see those relationships. Ultimately, once it becomes a pivot table, you can organize and group data. You can actually start sort of see these trends because you start to see these kind of cross-reference relationships between them and ultimately tell stories around your data. Because otherwise, when we get this kind of flat data that's taken in from another external source, we can't really tell stories around it, but pivot tables allow us to do it. So you might be wondering, well, are pivot tables for me? Well, almost everybody who's working with data at all can work with pivot tables. So if you're working with sales reports, you can summarize all the data from product or region, time period, salespeople, whatever you want. You mash it all together, and it allows you to filter it, right, and do all kinds of other wonderful things with calculations, etc. You might be just working with some maybe non-financial data like survey analyses. You can analyze survey responses. You can look at demographics and see how all of those things kind of compare with each other. Maybe you're just working with inventory. You got lots and lots of inventory and you want to just track stock levels by different, products and suppliers, maybe shipping dates, how much things cost, all that good stuff, right? So that's going to be the first place where we're going to start, is really just how we can create pivot tables. And then we're going to get into something called data modeling. Right now, data modeling, if we go and get definitions here, a data model is a framework for organizing and structuring, very similar to what we did before, but mostly it's about multiple data sets, right? And it could be any kind of file format. It doesn't have to be Excel. You can bring it in from basic text. If you're working with like SQL, or you're working with Oracle, even PDFs, right? You can actually bring it in. As long as it's in a tabular format, you can start to analyze it. And you can have multiple data sets all come together and mashed up. Whereas a pivot table is just going to be one data set. A data model is going to be multiple. And ultimately, this is a really key thing here, we have to find these relationships that exist between the data set. We kind of have to sort of marry them together, right? We're saying, hey, you know this about that other one, so therefore you're going to know all the rest of it based off of all the other ones that are sort of related to them. So if one has the customer ID, another one has the customer ID, but the other one does not have, let's say, state information, the other one does not have the product information, when you marry them together, a data model then occurs. Okay, and you're going to see this is what it's going to kind of look like visually once I show you how you can do it. Okay, now we are going to kind of touch a little bit about on Power Query. I'll kind of briefly go into this. So Power Query, it's a tool in Excel that simplifies the data modeling. So it allows you to simplify your data modeling process. We're going to get into that. I'm going to show you what that's going to look like, and allows you to streamline the process of what we call preparing and shaping the data. So we're going to be able to kind of take this data before we bring it in to analyze it and do our data model, and we're going to ultimately kind of clean it up, right? I'm just going to give you a brief, quick overview of how we can do that. We're going to see here we have these two different sheets, and I really want to analyze this, right? Because if you look at this, this is just a massive, massive set of data. And again, it's kind of just sort of two-dimensional. And I'd really like to analyze it. I want to sort of organize it. I want to sort of tell stories and see trends around this data. So if we look at it, we can see we have order date, we have product names, we have shippers, we have unit price, company name, just a mountain of data. So what could I do to kind of help make sense of this, to really help me, again, tell stories, analyze it, really break it down and see those relationships? Well, very simply, all I'm going to do is go over to here to Insert, and you see I have this option here for Pivot Table over there in the upper left, right? First choice. I click on that, and first thing they're going to ask me is, well, what's going to be the actual table that we're going to be working with? And I have a table here called grocery, right? I've named that. And then the other question is, well, where do you want to put it? So very simply, I want to create a new pivot table based off of all this grocery data, and I want to put it on a new worksheet. That's great. So then I'm going to go ahead and say, okay. And now I'm ready to start building out my pivot table, because notice here, I have this new sheet 1. So I'm going to very simply name that. I'm going to call this grocery PT. So we know that there's a distinction between this original grocery data and this grocery PT data. Okay, so what this is going to be is my pivot table based off of this grocery data set that's originating from this. So great. So now all I have to do is start building out my pivot table. Now, if you've never used pivot tables, I have good news for you. Essentially, it's an exercise in drag and drop initially, right? It's like, you know what? I don't really know what to do. You don't have to know what to do initially because you can just drag and drop in one direction, or you can say, listen, if that didn't work, drag and drop in another direction. So if we look over here in the lower right, we have something called values. I'll put that in green here. And then we also have our columns and our rows. We'll put those in blue here. So I put this in green because this is essentially where our numbers typically go, right? Notice how there's a little sigma. So it's going to allow us to do a quick little calculation. So if I scroll down here, you'll notice I have something called extended price. So very easily, I'm just going to drag that here. And right away, my pivot table has begun. Beautiful. And I've got $1.1 million worth of sales here. Lovely. That's great. But does it tell me a story? Not really. So now I can just start building this out with my rows and my columns. So let's just say, for example, I wanted to do some information, let's just say about product name. So I want to know how my products are doing. So it's going to kind of do a deeper dive into what that $1.1 million is. So I just drag this over here, and now boom, just like that, I've got all this great information about my products, okay, and how much we've sold of each of those. But guess what? I can go even deeper, and I can say, hey, you know what? I'd like to know how each company sold each product. So now I can create kind of like a parent-child type of thing, like a heading and a subheading, again, by simply dragging and dropping. But I'm going to drag two inside of my rows. I'm going to go over here to company name. And now you can see how it sort of builds it out by a heading and a subheading. Company and product. So my product is Alice Mutton. This is how each company, right, sold how much of that, right? So I have these stores that are selling these products. We scroll down, you can see how it breaks it down in this really, really beautiful way. Now I can continue going here, right? Let's just say I'm concerned about, let's just say city. So I can go ahead and drag city down like that, and you can see, oh, how each city had their own thing here. But what I'm going to do now, because I'm running out of space, I'm going to actually move this little pivot table field out like this, and then make it nice and big like that. I really like doing that. So that allows me to really kind of get a lot of space here. Now what I'd like to do, you know what, is maybe just not work with city anymore. So I'm just going to drag that out. Remember, it's about dragging and dropping. Really nice and easy. Okay, that's great. And you know what? I'm concerned about quantity. So I'm going to bring quantity in here. Okay, great. Now I'm really kind of telling a nice little story here. Now let's go a little bit deeper. What other things we may want to do is I'd like to see this as dollars, because people are getting very kind of confused about this, and they don't know if this is, you know, units. They don't know if it's euros. They don't know anything. So you know what? Very simply, I'm going to convert this number into dollars. So all I do is right click. Now right clicking really goes a long way in pivot tables. So if I right click, notice a lot of options appear, and you can see here one of them is number format. So I choose that, and then very simply I'm going to double click on currency, and now boom, it becomes dollars. Okay, so pretty straightforward. Now let's go ahead and do a couple of other things that I'd really like to see on this, right? And so would my boss. My boss is like, okay, this is actually really good information, but I'd actually like to see these numbers as maybe percentages. Maybe you want to filter out some of this data. Okay, so pivot tables really allows you to do those things quickly and easily. So I have my extended price, as you can see here, these numbers, 27,000, etc., right? All these numbers below it. And these are just like my raw numbers. What I'd really like to do is, again, see them as percentages. So all I do, very simply, is I bring extended price down again. And you see that I'm going to have repeated numbers. But what I'm going to do is make this get converted so it's not showing as the sum of adding up all of these, but as percentages. Because really all I care about is, hey, you know what, my product name, I'd like to know what's the percentage of my grand kind of total of all my sales. So very simply, I right click once again, and you'll see I have this option here for summarize values by and show values as. Summarize values by, it's actually pretty straightforward. In case you're not wanting to sum them, you just want to count them up or average them. That's really neat. But what I'm here for is to show values as, and I'm going to focus on these two right here, or these three, excuse me, my grand total, my column total, and my row total, right? All percentages right there, okay? So once again, you just right click and then show values as, and you can see here is percent of grand total. And you can see that Alice Mutton is 2.3% of all of my grand total of all my sales. Okay, if I were to right click again, say show values as, you can see this is going to be the column total. If I had more than one kind of column and row interspersed with each other, these would be really helpful for me. But this is pretty much the place that most of us are going to start with to be able to know what is the percentage for that particular kind of series. All right. Now, in order to kind of see this a little bit better, because these numbers are not necessarily relevant for me, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to collapse all of my product names into one, so I don't necessarily need to see all my company names. And again, guess what? That's a right click away. I right click, I'm going to come over here to expand collapse, and I'm just going to say collapse entire field. Ah, there we go. And now I have all these numbers here, beautiful, and I can see everything I want. Boom, right, that adding up to 100%. Okay, now let's go ahead and sort these. Okay, because that's again going to help me tell my story a lot better. So if I right click here, you're going to see here I have an option to sort. I'm going to say largest to smallest, and then boom, these guys are on top now. Okay, and again, how many times have I right clicked so far and you see the value in that? Let's go ahead and try a different table altogether. Let's go over to here to sports inventory, and possibly a little bit more straightforward, right? Not quite as dizzying, but still a lot of data. And how do we manage this? Okay, and then notice how this has some really good data, and we have product description, we have a store name, region, etc. And we also have, again, our numbers. So once again, I'm going to go over here to insert, pivot table. Okay, and again, this is called sports inventory. And by the way, just so we're clear about how this is even getting this name in here, this is known as a table, right? So this guy right here that I've created is a table. So if I cancel out of this, you'll notice that this is a table design, and this is sports inventory table. So you can very easily create any data and convert it to a table anytime, and then very simply give it a name. Now, why would I make my pivot table be a table first? Well, that allows me to continually add on more data later on, and I can continue to go. Even if it goes up to like 500 or 5,000 rows, the table remains the same. Okay, so it allows it to be kind of like dynamic when it is linking up to the pivot table itself. Okay, so if I go over here to insert, I'm going to say pivot table. There's my sports inventory, new worksheet. Okay, and then boom, there I am. And now, once again, let's go ahead and start off with my unit price. Now, let's say, for example, I accidentally move one of these into the wrong cell, right? I'm going to go ahead and move unit price to rows. And just notice what it did. It's like, oh, that's not exactly what I wanted. So you know what? I'm going to move that out. Let's see if I moved product description into values. I do that. It's like, oh, okay, well, it did do something. It counted how many products I have. And maybe that's exactly what you want. But if you don't want it, just drag it away, kind of toss it into the abyss, and you're good. Okay, so don't worry about making mistakes as you're going through these things. Just like, okay, it's very easily resolved. But sometimes you may find some happy mistakes. You're like, oh, actually, I kind of wanted that after all. I didn't even realize it. Okay, so let's go ahead and bring unit price down here, and I'll bring my product description here. And then you know what? Let's go ahead and work with dates briefly so you can see what this is going to look like. I'm going to bring date right above here inside my rows. And you'll notice here that even though like all my dates, if you look back over here, were all individual dates like this, it automatically grouped it for me by years, by quarters, months, etc. Now, which is pretty awesome, but not exactly always what I want. Okay, so if you want to control how your dates are grouped, meaning let's say I only care about months, I don't really care about quarters, right? Or even these individual days, what we're going to do is we're going to jump over to here to our pivot table analyze right here, because notice how we have this new contextual tab, okay? And you'll also notice that once I click on any of these dates, I now have this section to click on called group field, okay? And guess what groups are going to be available there? And then also notice the range that it's showing me here too. So you know what? I don't really care about quarters. That's great. So then I just click on that. It goes away. I click OK. And now look at that. That's way nicer to read. Very cool. Love that. Maybe I don't care about months, right? Same deal. I come back to it and all I got to do is uncheck months right there. And it's going to come right to maybe a view that I care more about. Okay. We're going to talk about filtering, and also I want to talk about slicing. Okay, so this is a large set of data, and I only really care about certain bits of data. So I may want to filter by this data here. So filtering is pretty straightforward. You can see I have this little filter data, this filter drop down, and then very easily I can say, you know what, I'm only really concerned with these guys here, right? I click OK, and then bam, it's filtered out, right? No big deal, nothing too fancy. You've probably done this in a lot of your other exercises, but you can see how nice and easy that is, okay? Helping me tell my story. Now, another kind of parallel to that is working with something called slicers. And a slicer allows you to do the same thing as we just did with filtering, but do it a little more kind of interactively, right? A little more visually, a little bit more kind of gamified. So if I say insert slicer now, again, here I am in my pivot table analyze tab, insert slicer. You're going to see here, it gives me all of my column headings that I started with, asking me, hey, what would you like to filter by? Right? So I like to filter by product name, right? So I can very easily do that. But you know what? I can even filter by other things that are not on my pivot table fields here, right? So pretty easily, if I wanted to and kind of get a different story there, I easily could do that. So I do that, and then bam, guess what's going to pop up? Make this a little bit wider, maybe a little bit taller. And you can see here is all of them right there, right? So you can say, okay, only show me that, only show me that. So just note how kind of easy that is for me to just click away to see exactly what I want, rather than having to go to some drop-down menu, etc. Okay. Now, the slicer has additional sets of options, just like how our pivot table did, called the slicer tab right up on top here. And I certainly could change the color if I want to, right? I could even add on additional columns to make this a little bit kind of better screen real estate by making it so I can kind of see everything, right? That's pretty neat. I like that. And if I wanted to do multi-select, I can simply come back to the slicer itself and just start going crazy just like that. These are all my stores, very easily accessible, beautiful. Love that. So now let's transition into data modeling. So if we look at the data that we're going to be starting with for data modeling, we actually have 3 different data sets we want to kind of merge together. We have product, right? If you notice, we have all these here, and just notice some of the columns that we have here, right? Our product ID, category, subcategory, etc. Orders, which also has some information up on top, including product ID. And then we also have customers, which has customer ID, et cetera, all this. Now, it's important to make sure that before you start working with your data for data modeling, you have some type of potential for what we call relationships, okay? So I have customer, and this has a customer ID. And look at my orders, that also has some information here, right? Order ID, and oh, look at that, customer ID. So these guys are going to be buddies. Now, product does not have customer ID, right? But it does have product ID. But guess who else has product ID? Is orders, okay? And you can see there is my product ID. So we are going to be creating relationships around all 3 of those data so they can be merged together as one to be able to bring them all together into one pivot table, okay? With the pivot table we did earlier, which is one data set. We're going to actually bring all of these things in here, and we're going to use a multitude of tools to be able to do that. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and just start off with a blank data set here. And what I'm going to do is use my data tab to very simply get data, right? Notice it says here, get and transform data, just like how we talked about earlier with data modeling. So when you're getting data, you can get data from a lot of different types of file sources, like text, from the web, right? You click on get data, you can see here from file, even from PDFs and some of these other ones like XML, all this stuff. For our purposes, just going to be in Excel format, but certainly you have the option to do it from all kinds of other platforms. So I'm going to go ahead and go to that first. And then you're going to see here, I'm going to go right to my first data source, which is going to be customers. And when I say import, you're going to notice that this new little toolbar is going to pop up, or this dialog box is going to pop up. And you'll see here is my customer table, right? Boom, there it is, the sheet that I have there. And we're going to take a look at all these options that I have here to show my table here, right? Now, underneath here, you're going to see that I have the option to load the data, and that'll load it into Excel to go right away. I can transform the data, which is going to take me to a different program altogether, okay? Or I can just cancel it altogether. So you know what? I'm going to actually transform this. I want you to see what this looks like when it takes us into how we're going to be able to transform the data into the Power Query editor. So now this is going to pop up, and believe it or not, we're in this sort of like adjacent type of program, right? And I'll just show you here. I'm now in the Power Query editor. That happens automatically, right? And all of us should have access to this, right? It should automatically bring it up for us. Now, why am I here? Well, I may want to kind of transform the data, say, hey, listen, you know what? Some of this was maybe not right. And you know what? I found one that now I can go into this and I can now make it right. Well, what's wrong with this data? Oh, it's missing some zeros here, right? Maybe you don't want some of these columns, right? You can very easily just simply right click and remove them, right? There's all kinds of different options you have here to be able to kind of make the data ready for your different analysis. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to convert this zip code from 123, because it thinks that this is just a regular number, by clicking on the 123. Notice I'm literally clicking on that 123 with my left click, and I'm just going to make this text. Okay, and then you see a little pop-up. It's going to ask me, do you want to replace current? You want to add new step? I'm going to go and replace the current step, basically saying, hey, you know what? These are all your steps that you're working with here. As you kind of progress through Power Query, new steps now appear here, and I don't really need to make a new one, so I just added on that one to replace that, and now you can see it fixed it. Okay, now I could also say, you know what? I don't really work with other countries, so I can very easily even just remove this column, and then it's not going to show up when I finally load it into Excel. Okay, so that's just kind of the high level of how we may want to work with Power Query. Now, I need to bring it back into Excel. So we're going to go over to here to this close and load. And then I'm going to choose this other one here that says close and load to, because I actually want to get some extra options. And we're going to see here that it says here, select how you want to view this data in your workbook. Do you want to view as a table, pivot table, report, etc.? And you know what? For my purposes, I only want to create a connection. And most importantly here, I want to add this data to the data model. Okay, so basically, if you think about what it's asking you here, when you check that, is you're going to pair this up with other data sets, right? So I definitely want to choose this one. And only creating connection is just making it so I don't really see any other data here. I don't really need to see it as a table. I don't need to see it kind of lingering about. I only want the connection. Okay. All right. So go ahead and do that again. We'll get a nice little review there. Okay. So there's my customers. Okay. Click on that and then transform. And we're going to do this 2 more times, by the way. Okay. So I'll fix that, make that text. Okay. Replace current. And then I'm going to remove the country. Okay. Boom. There we have it. And then one more time, close and load to. And then you can see here, only create the connection, add this data to the data model. So now you can see there is my connection with my customers. Let's go ahead and do that again. So get data from file, Excel, and then I'm going to bring in my orders. And you can see there's my orders. You can see it all right there. And you have the option now to kind of skip this if you want to entirely, but I'm going to transform it one more time. It's going to take me one more time to my Power Query editor. Right? It seems a little bit weird, I know, but we're going to see, we're going to go over to here. I'm going to notice something kind of weird about this data because I have these shipping costs, and for some reason, my data source kind of brought in these numbers as 4 decimals here, right? Kind of weird here. Also my profit. So very simply, I'm going to convert that into currency. It doesn't put the dollar signs on there, but it does convert it to look like currency, right? We can do all that stuff in Excel. Do the same thing here, my 1.2, convert that to currency, replace current. Beautiful, that looks great. And then once again, same exact process, close and load to, create only connection, add this data to the data model. Cool, now I have these two guys who are waiting to get kind of match made, right? Okay, awesome. Now let's go ahead and do the third one. And this one we're going to do a little faster because you know what? Maybe you don't need to do any transformation. So if I go over here to products, right, this time I'm noticing that, like, you know, everything actually looks pretty good. I don't really need to change anything. I don't need to transform this. But before I just go and click on load, I want to see what's living right underneath here. So if I click on this little drop down, we have this option to load to. Okay, well, when I click on that, it's going to give me those same options that I saw before. Okay, you can see, there it is. Okay, but it's not taking me into Power Query necessarily. So I'm going to say only create connection, add this to the data model. Okay, and then very simply, I click OK. Now, these are all part of my potential data model, right? That's all kind of connected there, ready to be made into a relationship. Just imagine we're kind of matchmakers. They're all in the same room, but they're still strangers, right? We haven't introduced them to say, hey, you know what? You guys have mutual friends. So since you have mutual friends, you can be friends with each other, okay? So this is where the relationship part comes in, okay? So we need to actually make these relatable, because if I try to do a pivot table right now, it will not work. It will be confused because the relationship have not been officially established, okay? So this is the part, I just have to say, that is not available for the Mac, right? For some reason, they have not created this, okay? But you can do most of these things here, but in terms of the relationships, right, it's not available on the Mac version of Excel. I have two ways that I can now work with creating my relationships. Notice over here, I have this data tools, and I have this little icon right there. I click on that, and you can see here is this manage data model. So when I click on that, that actually takes me into something called Power Pivot, okay? And the easiest way for me to actually create the relationship is going over here to diagram view. But I'm going to show you a couple of things here. Number one, here's diagram view. And number two, way down below, notice I have all three of those tables that I actually brought in are all available for me. That's great. Okay. But this diagram view is now going to allow me to start making those relationships. So earlier on in my slide deck, I showed you kind of like a table that looked like this, where we can start creating our relationships. Okay. So let me go ahead and make this a little bit taller, make sure we see everything. And we have to make the relationships occur between the sort of similar or really the exact match of all of these columns, okay? So notice here I have customer ID. Hey, meet customer ID. That's amazing. So this, again, is going to be a nice little simple drag and drop. Say, hey, you know what? Good. That's great. Let's go ahead and how about this one? Product ID, meet product ID. Oh, great. Now, keep in mind, they don't have to have the same exact name. It just has to be the same exact data. Okay, but this could be called, you know, like product ID 2025 or something like that, or something that's kind of more customary and proprietary for you. Okay, now if we look at these numbers here, when I hover over it, notice it shows me what it is right there. Boom, customer ID to customer ID. Okay, now this says one, and then if you can see this here, there's a little asterisk here. This is a one-to-many relationship. Okay, I have one customer that can have many orders. I have one product, this is my product database, and here's my orders that can have more than one order, right? So many people are ordering and many products are being ordered, okay, of the same exact product, okay? That's great. Now, I've established the relationship. That is what Excel needs, okay? So if you look over here in the far, far upper left, there's this little Excel logo. That's going to allow me to go right back to Excel. Come back here, and nothing really fancy happens, right? They don't give you any applause. There's no fireworks, no nothing, right? And you can see, bam, we have that ready to go. Okay. Now, I will tell you one thing before we create our pivot table. Okay, those of us who would like to, you could also put on this Power Pivot extra tab that I have here. Again, this is just for PC users. Okay, if I click on that, notice this is going to allow me to have a bigger option here and a few other kind of more advanced options. If you wanted to do that, I've created a whole deck that shows you the breakdown of this. But if you go over here to File and then Options, and you can see that there's these add-ins. Okay. Now the add-in that I have here is this Power Pivot for Excel. If you want to get it, you just have to go over here to this little drop down to the COM add-ins, click on Go, and then boom, you're going to see there's this Power Pivot. Now everybody should have access to this. It's totally free. You should be fine, right? Again, everybody meaning everybody on a PC. Okay, so now here comes the moment of truth, okay? Because we have all this data, right? We've added to the data model, and then we're able to create relationships between all that data. So now let's go ahead and do a pivot table on this. Okay, so if I go over to here to Insert, this time I'm going to click on the drop down for pivot table, and then notice here's this option for From Data Model. Okay, see that? From the data model that I created. So I choose that, and now it's going to ask me, okay, well, where would you like to put this? Okay, I'm going to say New Worksheet. And now I want you to notice what's occurring over here on the right-hand side. All three of my tables are now available. So this time I'm definitely going to make this nice and big so we can kind of see what we're working with here. Okay, and what I want you to notice is that all of them now have a seat at the table, so to speak. Okay, you can see, all right, look at that. So everybody can be represented. So let's now go ahead and see what we have here. Well, I'm concerned about, let's just say, states. So I'll bring states over here. Great, all my states are here. And then these guys, the customer table, didn't really know anything about orders at any point, but now they can be friends. So now let's go ahead and go over here to sales. Now they have kind of merged and meshed together because of that data modeling and that relationship. Okay, and then just for fun, I'll go ahead and bring in profit just the same. And customers are like, and states are like, oh, that's great. I love all that. Okay, cool. And now let's go ahead and maybe bring in, I don't know, product name. Okay, I'll just go ahead and bring that down. And then beautiful. Now we have something very powerful to give us lots and lots of information and help tell our stories. Okay, and of course we can keep going on and on and on here. Bam, bam. Okay, great. Move this around. Everything that we learned in our pivot tables can now be applied. All right. But how we get to this place is a little bit more kind of circuitous, right? It does kind of involve a little bit more sort of, getting things kind of married to each other, creating that data model, right? And then ultimately creating the relationship between them. Okay. Now we can see here's all our information right up here. Now I'm going to go ahead and bring this back over here. And now let's just kind of bask in this, right? This is amazing. 3 different data sets are now talking to each other. Now, earlier, I showed you how we can convert some of these to dollars. Well, you know what? This is not dollars. So let's very easily fix that. Right click, number format, currency, beautiful. And there we have it. That's good to go. Love that. And if I wanted to collapse any of these, let's go ahead and collapse it by this category, right? I'm going to right click on that. And you can see it's my option to expand collapse. And I'm going to say collapse entire field. Beautiful. Okay, so you can see, again, how I can kind of tell my stories, but way, way more sort of sophisticated. Now, one thing you may have noticed that I'm missing some data up here, right? And if I expand everybody out, let's go and expand entire field, right? I'm even missing data here, right? That's kind of weird because I wouldn't mind actually seeing kind of like the math around this stuff and see my totals. And more specifically, I want to see my subtotals. Okay, so how do I do that? Well, we're going to jump over to a new tab here. Outside of my pivot table analyze, there is something called design. Okay, and the design has a whole bunch of options here ready for us to sort of display and present and really think about it like reporting. and reporting your content, right, in a way that's going to be a little more beneficial for you, for your data, and certainly for your audience. So I'm going to go over to here to the subtotals section. And then you can see here it says, do not show subtotals, show all subtotals at the bottom of the group, show all subtotals at the top of the group. I want to see it at the top for right now. I choose that, and then, oh, how amazing is that? Brilliant. So now I have all the data that was not there before for some reason. Now it's easily retrievable. Okay. Really, really nice. Now, all the other stuff that I might want to do in terms of filtering and doing all this good stuff, I can very, very easily do with this. So I come back over to here. Here's my slicers. Here's all my other good stuff here. Here's my ability to filter. Okay, if I right click, here's all my ability to sort. Pretty much everything we've covered working with our pivot tables is available here. Okay, now you may want to do a few more kind of like design oriented things. So what we could do now is we can do a completely different pivot table, but based off of the same data. Okay, so if I wanted to, I can do it side by side from right here. I could do it on a completely different sheet if I want to, but understand that many people, when they are working with pivot tables, they have kind of what we call a dashboard, right? Like the dashboard can sort of be built out to be able to have more than one sort of story on the same workbook, okay? So if I go back over to here to insert, and then guess what? Pivot table, data model. And then you can see I'm going to say existing workbook, and I'm going to put it right here, right? It's like, okay, great. Yeah, put it right there. So we can kind of have a little sort of side-by-side story around this. Yeah, that's amazing. So I'll go over to here to my orders. And then once again, remember here is my sales. So boom, I'll bring that in. That's good to have that number right there. And then I'll go over here to my products. And then maybe I'm only really concerned about my categories and product names at this point. So let's bring product name here. Boom. Okay. And then category. Let's maybe bring that up. Okay. Cool. And that's really all I care about for this bit of data set, right? Or maybe I don't. Maybe it's only going to be, boom, just on these guys here. And that's going to be a very, very simple story that I tell. And I can have them side by side. It's the same data set, and I can work with that very quickly and easily. So I'll go ahead and right click on that. I'm going to go ahead and do number format, and then I'll say currency. The thing I want you to understand that's so critical about what we're working with here, since we have so much data, our original data still exists kind of elsewhere, right? So if I wanted to kind of change some of this data, if we look over here on the right-hand side, I have two little tabs available to me, okay? This is the one I'm currently working with, which is my pivot table. If I click on this one, guess what's waiting here, right? My original data that I started with, okay? So let's just go over here to, let's just say orders, right? If I right-click on this, notice all these options that are here, including the option to edit the data. And then earlier you saw me delete it, right? Because there was that extra one that came in, right? And anything else you want to do, maybe it's not coming in, you know, automatically. If somebody else is editing the data, you can refresh it, okay? What we're going to do now is edit it. And guess where that's going to take us to? I click on edit. It's going to take us back to the Power Query editor that we started with. And not only that, it has all three of the queries sitting there for me to be able to edit anytime, right? Any of these things I might want to do that, okay? So let's just say, for example, I notice, oh, you know, one of those, this is incorrect, right? It shouldn't say subcategory, or at least with a capital C. I'll just make it like that, sub, and I'll just do like that with a hyphen, right? Easy to remember that. Great, okay? And then we can see any of these things. Maybe I want to call this instead of product name, product title, something like that, okay? And you can see, all right, great, easy to work with, beautiful, okay? And then any of the other, you know, types of labeling or formatting, or you can make those changes right from here. And guess what? Even if you were planning to like do what's called like a calculated field, right? You can do a calculated field from here, right? So if you wanted to, let's say you wanted to multiply unit price by quantity, you can do all that stuff from here, because notice there's this add column, and then from here, you can actually do it as a custom column. Okay, so if I go to, for example, let me just briefly go over this here. Let's just go over to here too. We have these numbers here, okay? And in Excel right now, it's not going to let me to kind of do a calculation, but here I can do a calculation. So now we're getting to maybe a little bit more advanced stuff. So we can actually see, hey, you know what? We can actually do more than just organize our data. We can start to do some pretty nifty calculations, right? And let's just say, I'm kind of making this up here, but let's just say I really wanted to know about the quantity times the sales to be able to really give me a number that I couldn't have ordinarily, okay? So what we're going to do next is I'm going to go over here. Remember, I'm inside Power Query. I'm going to go over here to Add Column, and then notice here is Custom Column, okay? So I choose that, and now this new dialog box pops up. And it's going to very simply give me a new column name. I'm going to call this Total Sales, right? Whatever, okay? And maybe you can't see it from where you're at, but it's waiting for me right there with this little equal sign, implying that it wants it to be a formula, okay? Boom, I can very easily do that. And now I'm just going to multiply, let's just say, quantity times sales, okay? So all I do now is double click on that. That's going to come in, and I'm going to say multiplied by, and then again, double click and make that sales. So if you can see, there it is, a little asterisk there, boom, boom, okay? And now I'm going to have a new column now that exists over here. Beautiful, okay? And let's make that, so it's going to be currency. And then I can move this in whatever order I want to as well, right? So that actually makes a little more sense to have this over here. Just simply click and drag it. Okay, so I've now kind of changed the source of this data. Okay, so I'm going to come back to home, and then very simply, I'm going to close and load, right? So I'm going to very simply click on that, and then you're going to see how it's kind of refreshing. So what we want to see now, okay, is that inside of my, I believe I put it into my orders, right? We should now have the total sales. Okay, so now I can add that in to this data set here. Okay, so if I go over to here, you can see now my total sales can now be brought in to here that didn't exist before. Okay, so if I right click now, go ahead and make that into a number format, go to currency, boom, now I have everything I need. And you know what? I don't need these. And now I have a set of data that I did not have before. Okay, because that total sales didn't exist before. And if we look at the other thing that I changed, which was my subcategory, okay, we'll go over to here. Notice there's my subcategory. That changed also, right, with my little hyphen. You can see how nice and easy that is to have it all sort of connected to each other. So once you create that relationship, once you create that data model, and you're in Power Query, and then you bring it into Excel, you're not completely disjointed, right? You can always come back and you can make those changes there. But I think it's important for us to kind of do a little review of how we even started to begin with, right? And I'll go over this relatively quickly, but how we started is we went over here to data and get data. And we got each of these individual ones one by one, right? And we brought them in, right? And we can see here when we bring it in, it allows us to do what we call a transformation if necessary, right? That transformation, for a lot of us, this could be completely optional. You don't need to transform it because it looks beautiful. It's perfect. Maybe you do some of the transformation in Excel. It's totally fine, right? If it needs it, it is recommended that you do use Power Query. And then we finally loaded it, or we loaded it and we said load to. And then remember, we had the option to now do what, right? Only create the connection, and then, very important, add this to the data model. Okay, and then we did that 3 times. And then after that, it was available here inside of our queries and connections, which came in automatically, right? As we did them one by one. And then what did we do after that? We had to create the data model, wait for it, the relationship, okay? That is really the key thing. These guys don't know each other. So if you remember, they're all kind of sitting like wallflowers in the same room, waiting for somebody to introduce one to the other, okay? And that part is a little bit kind of hiding It's inside of the Data tab. And then you'll see here should be this option here under Data Tools. And then when you choose that, you'll see there's this option for relationships, or you can go over here to Manage Data Model. Okay, and then once I did that, that took me to Power Query. And then I was able to make the relationships by dragging and dropping all of the kind of relative categories, right, from one to the other.
Well, congratulations everyone for completing this course. So hope you enjoyed this class, hope you learned a lot, and we look forward to seeing you in future lessons. Thanks everyone.
If you're not a subscriber, click down below to subscribe so you get notified about similar videos we upload. To see the full course that this video came from, click over there. And click over there to see more videos from Simon Says It.